You don't need to be a quilter to make quilted bags and pouches. Hey, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini, and in this video, I'm sharing with you 3 tips on how you can add quilting to your bag projects. Now, I've been teaching sewing and quilting for almost 2 decades now, and I'm getting ready to open up registration for the latest Crafty Gemini Bag Club. Now, one of the things I wanted to focus on here is making some quilted bags. Oftentimes, I get from beginner students who are not quilters, they like the look of the quilting on the outside panels of the bags, but they're not exactly sure how to do it since they don't really consider themselves quilters. They don't know how to free motion quilt, they don't have a long arm quilting machine, and so they immediately assume that they can't get that really cool textured quilted look in their bag projects. So I want to get rid of that idea. If you are a beginner or confident beginner sewist and you want to start learning how to tackle bags, you like the quilted look, but you're thinking it's way out of your reach, keep watching because these tips will come in handy. Now, when we talk about making quilted bags, the quilting refers to the stitching that's done through the different layers that make up usually the exterior panel and the handles and stuff like that. So here, for example, all these diagonal stitching lines that intersect and create these cool diamond texture on the outside of the bag, those stitching lines are the quilting of it, okay? Now, a lot of times when you hear people talk about quilted bags, if you're a beginner, you're not too familiar with bag making, you probably assume that it's going to be something like this fancier bag, where the panels are quilted either with some free motion, like you see I did these swirls in the panels here. This I did on my long arm quilting machine. You do not have to do it like this, okay? So the tips I'm going to share here are for doing some straight line stitching that anyone can do to create quilted bag panels on a regular home sewing machine. Tip number 1. Give it a try if you never have, because you may be surprised at the outcome. Believe it or not, these are the exact same bag. This is my Sunday tote bag pattern. I have a video course in PDF for it. You can check the link for that in the description box below. But look how totally different they look, even though they're the exact same bag. This one was done with this pretty chicken print. It was just basted to the foam. There is no stitching through the bag paneling. So this type of construction technique will allow you to finish the bag a little bit quicker because you're not spending time stitching through it, right? So if you're wanting a smooth look like that, that's one way to do it. But the quilting, these diagonal stitching lines that once they intersect create these cool diamond shapes, look at the amazing texture that it gives. Now the fabric I used here is called soft vinyl. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. But you could do the same stitching on cotton fabric to the foam stabilizer. Now this works fine whether you're using a foam interfacing or some type of fusible fleece, whatever the pattern calls for. If it's puffier and loftier, the more texture you're going to get when you quilt it like this. Okay, so again, the exact same bag pattern, 2 totally different looking bags. I'm going to run you through a quick little demo just so you can see what it takes in order to draw out your lines and stitch them out nice and straight so you get a nice even design across your quilted panel. So I'm doing this in a mini scale so you can see. If the pattern calls for foam, which is a nice puffy stabilizer that doesn't add a lot of weight, it's what all these bags that I have shown you so far are made with. Now, depending on the construction and the pattern instructions, it may have you placing fabric on one side of the foam and leaving the other side with nothing, depending on how the bag is going to be constructed. But if you're making an entire quilted panel, then you would have all 3 layers. So some patterns that are maybe going to be bound on the inside seams will call for you to have fabric on each side. And that fabric would be pretty side up and pretty side out, so that the foam interfacing is just sandwiched inside of them. Now, depending on how large the panel is, you may want to use a temporary spray adhesive, something like this. This is my favorite one to use because it's non-toxic. It has no CFCs or HCFCs, so it says it's ozone safe and all that. And so you would just spritz it and then smooth it out, spritz it on the back and smooth it out. And that's just going to help keep the fabric in place. Make sure that you're doing this either outside or in a well-ventilated area with a fan, okay? Once you have your quilt sandwich, now you need to mark it somehow. I have several different tools here that you can use. These are called Hera markers, and they just basically have, it's not a blade, but it's just a sharper point in the plastic tool that will allow you to make creases on here. You could also use a water-soluble or air erasing pen to make the marks. or something like this Choco liner that has a little dispensing wheel, and as you roll it, the chalk dispenses and you can make your line. Obviously, I have all the different types of tools I need to mark because it's also going to depend on what color my fabric is, right? White is not really going to show up on this. This blue marker will show up good, but my preferred method for doing large panels like you've seen that I did here and in the other different types of bags that I've taught in the past is the Hera marker. This tool is amazing. You don't have to go back and remove any marker lines or dust off any chalk. I'll show you how it works. Let me grab a ruler. So I like to do those diagonal cross hatching lines, okay? So let me show you something. The two most common spacings that I use are going to be 1.5 inch, which is what I did here. And that just means that from along the same diagonal from one line to the next, I have it 1.5 inch apart. So 1.5 inches and then another 1.5 inch over. I have the next line and another 1.5 inch over. Okay, that's how we get it to be nice and evenly spaced out across the whole thing. The other one that I often tend to do, it's 1 inch apart. So they're a little bit tighter. You get more kind of flatness and crispness to the panel because the lines are a lot closer together, meaning we also have more thread built into the panel, but you also get kind of a tighter look when it comes to that grid overall on the panel. Okay, so if we were going to do 1.5 inch apart, you can start anywhere. Sometimes people like to start in the middle if they already have the exact panel size that they're going to be working with. I just start anywhere, really. You can start on a corner and just come a little bit of a ways in to begin. And with the Hera marker, you just take this sharp edge and you just run it back and forth along the edge of your ruler. So you can see the crease. And it's funny because you can hardly see it on camera, but when you have it at the sewing machine, you is all that matters that can see it, right? Because all you got to do is follow that line with the needle and feed it through nice and straight, and you're going to be able to stitch straight without any leftover marks or residue. So then to go 1.5 inches over from there, you can position it. Now I'm going to put it to my left side so I can take that crease and mark it or position it here on the 1.5 inch mark on my ruler. So 1.5, and it's hard to see on camera, but you can see it in person. I put the 1.5 inch line right on that line, follow it the whole way, and then I know that this edge is going to be 1.5 inches over. Now you can see my ruler is scooted up and I'm not quite down here, so just slide your ruler down. This helps if you have a larger panel to use a long strip ruler so that you can make sure that the edge of the ruler that you're about to follow spans the full distance that you need it to. Then I'll come in here and you're just pressing down and creasing it. Careful not to pull the fabric like I did there a little bit. Then the same thing, I'll position this on the line, 1.5 inch, follow it the whole way up, make sure I can see it there, and then we'll crease it again. So the smaller one works the same way, okay? So if I go like this, I think you can kind of see them on camera. That one crease, and this crease. There we go. Like right there, you see the 3 lines. You see it at that angle. And so you just go the full way across the panel. Now what I like to do is do all these lines all the way until I fill up the panel, and I'll go to the sewing machine and stitch right on the line. Then I'll come back in and mark it in the opposite direction and stitch those after. So I don't mark them all first, if that makes sense. I stitch one direction and then I go back and stitch in the other. So then I just make sure that my needle is in the center position and put whatever presser foot you need on to keep everything nice and straight. If your machine does not like to sew through a lot of bulk, consider putting on a walking foot to help feed the bulkiness easily through. Now, key here is to lengthen your stitch length. I'm going to set mine to 3 millimeters in stitch length, and then I usually like to start stitching somewhere in the middle. Take a diagonal in the middle of the panel to help anchor everything in place. That will help prevent you from having bubbles in your fabric on the inside of your quilted panel. Then I work my way to the right from that center diagonal. And then I like to slide over and stitch to the other side of that center in the same direction that I was going. Then I usually give it a good press. Then I'll go in with my ruler again, whatever marker I'm using, and work on the perpendicular diagonal lines. And you can play around with the spacing here. I've done where I do 2 lines close and then skip an inch and 2 lines close. You can basically create your own type of designs without the need for any free motion quilting skills because you're just working with straight lines that are pretty easy to follow. So I'm going to start again somewhere here. And I'll use this bigger one. It's easier to work on a harder surface for marking the lines if you are using that Hera marker. So remember that too. So I'm going to crease it there, turn it, and I'm going to measure 1.5 inches over from this line just so that I get even or equally sized diamonds inside these boxes from the cross hatching. And so this is what's called cross hatching lines. And now we'll head back to the sewing machine, and you can really see the creases there, I think. I'll go back in the exact same way I just did it, starting with one of the diagonal lines in the center, and then working my way in one direction, and then coming back and working my way in the other, and then I'll end up with the finished crosshatch design. And that's how you would end up with a crosshatch quilted panel. Usually the pattern instructions will have some type of a template then that would go on here for you to trim around out of it, or it would have you trim it down to a specific size, so all your edges would be nice and cleaned up, and you would be ready to move on to using it in whatever bag project, for example, this front quilted panel that I have here. Okay, so now for tip number 2. There are no skills needed in terms of free motion quilting, but if going through the steps I just showed you is a little bit too much, here is a way that you can get the same look, but without having to go through all the prep work or relying just on your marking skills in order to get straight-ish lines. One thing you can do is to work with a fabric that already has lines or a design that you can follow. This one just happens to have cross-hatching lines built into the design. These dark charcoal colored lines here are part of the fabric. So here's a chunk of the fabric. Super cool because a lot of these lines can be followed. It doesn't have to just be the cross hatching that I did. You can see that there's other kind of triangular lines, and that would be really cool to follow. You'd get an overall different texture than just the basic cross hatching that I did here. So if you have fabrics like this in your stash, consider using them to make some type of quilted bag. Now you can't even see my stitching here because I used a thread color that matches. You won't see it on the inside either because it is fully lined, but it is going to give you a little bit of texture there. And if you're using a non-fusible batting or some type of other sew-in stabilizer, the stitching that you do through the layers is going to keep those layers together. So you don't have to worry about the fabric lifting up or peeling off as you use it or in washing and drying it. And my third tip is to play around with fabrics and thread color because the combination of the two can really give a good visual pop to your finished bag panel. So for example, here I used a dark gray, almost black thread on a dark black fabric. So all you're seeing is the texture. You can barely make out the stitching. And that's because I want the random pops of this graffiti-like print of color here to pop from that black background. Now in this zip and zip pouch, and I'll include links to the different bags that are being featured here in the description box below if I have a course for it. The ones that you see like this are going to be part of my new bag club. So if you want to get in on that, make sure that you check the link in the description box below so you don't miss out on the early bird sale price. But talking about this, because we used a silver soft vinyl here and I used a variegated thread, which I'll show you a close-up of in a minute, we're getting both the texture that is created from stitching down between the soft vinyl and the foam interfacing, and then the reflective nature of this type of fabric really makes it pop, and you can really see that cross-hatching gives it a great geometric look. Now if we give you a close-up of the stitching, you can kind of see that the thread goes from like a pink to a bluish green, teal to purple. And so it's a variegated thread that changes color as you are stitching out. So that's another way to give some contrast and a pop of color against a background fabric that's a little bit more muted or just solid. All right, so there you have it. Those are some of my tips on how you can add quilting and texture to your exterior bag and pouch panels. Now, if you want to learn more or you want to get more into bag making, maybe you're a beginning bag maker and you're ready to elevate your sewing skills, stay tuned because I'm almost ready to open up registration for the latest Crafty Gemini bag club. We have done over a dozen different bag clubs over the years. I have thousands of students that have enrolled in all of my courses, and this is going to be a brand new one featuring 5 different bag bag projects that I've never taught before. They're all designed by me with very specific skills and techniques in mind that I want to teach you, my students. So if you're not yet subscribed to our email newsletter list, use the link in the description box below so you can make sure to get on there. That is how we send out all the information on how you can sign up for my latest bag club. Now keep in mind, if you're new here, that whenever we open up a new club, it's always open for a limited window at an early bird sale price. You'll be able to sign up after the fact, but at a higher price point. So if you think this is something you want to get in on, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, get on that email newsletter list, and then watch your inbox because we'll be sending out an email very soon. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope you learned something, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.